Hello, today we are going to take a look at a horror thriller movie titled, Gerald's Game. Before we begin, shout out to Flawed Ace, Mace Soliva, and Crab Kingdom. Thank you for your support. If you want to get mentioned in our next video, subscribe and drop a comment. The movie begins with a couple packing their bags for a romantic getaway. Jesse and Gerald are having marriage issues, so they travel to Alabama for some time away, with hopes of rekindling their love. Jesse suddenly sees a dog feeding on a carcass and they come to a halt. Gerald toots the horn and the dog moves away. The couple arrive at an isolated lake house and Jesse is concerned about the stray dog they saw earlier. While Gerald takes Viagra, Jesse feeds the hungry dog outside. Gerald comes over and scares the dog away, and he tells Jesse that it is expensive meat she's feeding the dog. They re-enter the house but leave the door open. Jesse soon changes into a new slip dress, placing the tag on a shelf above the bed. Then she lays on the bed in a sexy pose and signals that she is ready. Gerald walks in with handcuffs and Jesse giggles. He restrains Jesse with the handcuffs on each wrist locked to the bedposts. She seems a bit surprised by this, but goes along. Then Gerald takes a second Viagra and leaves his glass of water on the same shelf above the bed. He begins to enact a stranger rape fantasy, telling her to scream for help, knowing that no one is around for miles to hear her. She half-heartedly plays along but soon becomes uncomfortable, telling him to stop and uncuff her. He replies, "What if I won't?" Jesse yells at him to stop and Gerald backs away. He then accuses her of not even trying to rekindle their relationship. Jesse tells him that this is not necessary and Gerald says he was only trying to do something more exciting. We learn that Gerald has not touched Jesse in months and it's weird enough that he wanted this. When you least expect it, Gerald gets a stroke in the middle of their argument, and falls dead on top of her. It takes Jesse a moment to realize that he is dead, and she accidentally pushes him onto the floor. She tries to move the handcuffs up the bedposts, but it doesn't work and she is now trapped. She keeps crying out, wake up, and soon notices a pool of blood around Gerald's head. A few hours pass and she hears a noise outside as it gets darker. The stray dog enters through the open door and Jesse greets him in relief. The dog starts licking the blood around Gerald and Jesse tries to scare it away. But it bites a chunk out of Gerald's arm and eats it. Suddenly, Gerald stands up and begins talking, reacting to the missing skin and muscle on his arm, but Jesse notices his body remains on the floor. Obviously she is hallucinating at this point. Gerald taunts Jesse about the truths of their strained marriage and his erectile dysfunction. He then informs her that she has wasted hours already doing nothing, and she is beginning to suffer from dehydration and fatigue. Miraculously, Jesse pulls a hand out of a cuff and breaks free. She gloats to Gerald, but then when she turns around, we see that the real Jesse is still handcuffed to the bed. Jesse tells herself, the one still trapped, that it is easy to escape. Gerald and the self-assured Jesse tell things about herself and Gerald that she never had the courage to acknowledge. They trigger her to remember the glass of water above the bed. She manages to slant the shelf and get the glass of water into her hand. But she cannot bring it all the way to her mouth. So she keeps it back on the shelf. Just then, the dog bites another chunk out of Gerald's arm and starts feasting on his corpse. The hallucinations remind Jesse of the tag she put on the shelf, which she rolls into a drinking straw. She grabs the water again and drinks it from the straw. Afterwards, she falls asleep. When she wakes up in the dark, she sees a tall, deformed and obscured figure who reveals a bag of various bones and trinkets. She closes her eyes saying, "You're not real." But Gerald appears to say that the figure is death, waiting to take her. Then Gerald begins to call Jesse, Mouse, which unsettles her. This triggers a memory of her father Tom, who affectionately referred to her as Mouse. As they prepare to watch a solar eclipse, he gets her to sit on his lap and he masturbates to her. Jesse wakes up from this awful memory. Her hands are sore due to the lack of blood circulation and she gets severe cramps. Flies are swarming around Gerald's body. Soon, Gerald and Jesse's vision of herself taunt her that she never recovered from her father's assault, and that she married a man just like her father. Gerald teases Jesse about the disfigured man she saw, whom he calls the man made of moonlight, and points out what he suspects is a bloody footprint on the floor. Gerald tells her that this man will be back at night, and asks her to keep her wedding ring ready for his box of trinkets. Jessie then closes her eyes and counts to 10. Then she remembers a time after the assault, when her father came into her room and manipulated her to keeping it a secret. She promises not to tell anyone of what happened. When she wakes up, the Moonlight Man is licking her feet, but it's really the dog. It continues to feed on Gerald's corpse. Then she has another flashback. The night after the assault, when Jessie's mother asks her about the eclipse, she cuts her hand by squeezing the glass too hard. Remembering that, Jessie smashes the water glass and cuts her wrist in a way that enables her to peel back the skin, allowing her bloody hand to slip through the cuff. Afterwards, she drags the bed over to the counter, grabs the key of the handcuffs, and unlocks the other hand. Then she drinks water and bandages her bloody wrist using sanitary napkins. But she passes out on the floor from blood loss and fatigue. When she wakes up, Jessie sees the disfigured face of Gerald. When she walks out of the room, the man made of moonlight is at the end of the hall. She walks up to him boldly, and she gives him her wedding ring for his trinket box. Then she makes it to her car and drives away. She struggles to keep her eyes open, and starts hallucinating again. She sees the eclipse, and the Moonlight Man comes closer to her ear and whispers the word, mouse. Just then, the car crashes into a tree. Hearing the noise, people from a nearby house come out to help her. 6 months later, Jessie writes a letter to her 12-year-old self, struggling to write with her wounded hand. Voiceovers and scenes describe how she had pretended to have amnesia over the whole ordeal of being trapped in handcuffs, avoiding painful questions. But each night the man made of moonlight still appears before her, with a pair of handcuffs in his trinket box. She explains that the handcuffs her father put on her were silence, and Gerald's were comfort. Jessie uses some of Gerald's life insurance money to start a foundation for victims of sexual abuse. She also learns from the news about a serial killer with a disorder known as acromegaly, that gives a person an unusually large forehead, jaw, and hands and feet. The killer digs up crypts, stealing bones and jewels, and eats the faces of male corpses. This explains why he didn't harm Jessie in the house, and also why Gerald's face was disfigured. She finally realizes that the Moonlight Man is real and was not one of her hallucinations. Jessie arrives at court as the Moonlight Man is being sentenced, and calls for his attention. He quotes what she said before leaving the house, indicating that he was in fact there at the time. Seeing also Gerald's and Tom's face where his face is, she says, "You're so much smaller than I remember," and walks triumphantly out into the street with the sunlight gleaming down on her. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more awesome movie recaps. Thanks for watching, have a great day.